College football playoff semifinals 2 weeks from tomorrow. Second-seeded Michigan taking on TCU. First time these two have ever met. Wolverines lead the nation in point differential, while the Horned Frogs are the masters of the close games. 8 of their wins coming by 10 or fewer points. They are an explosive offense. They lead the nation in plays of 50 yards or longer. What a special celebrity guest appearance from Joshua
Celebrity?
Perry. Yeah, you're a celebrity.
I would hardly say so.
No, you are. It's crazy to think, we've been talking a lot about football here in the last couple of weeks, but I feel like once we got the pairings and kind of dove into them for a couple of days, there's so much other stuff going on, right? You've got coaching moves, you've got portal moves, you've got kind of all this ancillary stuff. There's a part of me that feels like the games have gotten somewhat lost in the shuffle, and now it's time to really start focusing and dissecting.
I mean, I totally understand how the games could get lost. I mean, think about where we are in college football right now, and there's so many factors that go into this, but you have the coaching changes, and that timeline has been moved up because of the early signing period. But you have
Which is next week, by the way.
Yes. So you have these coaching staffs trying to be filled out. You see Luke Fickell making moves over there at Wisconsin. Ryan Walters comes in right away, starts making moves at Purdue. And then you have NIL that kind of factors into that. So these coaches are being pulled different ways, trying to figure out exactly what that looks like for their programs. You mentioned the transfer portal. And so there are coaches trying to figure out who's going to be available to play in their bowl game. You got guys who are opting out and going to the draft. So, yeah, a lot of things going on. And it seems like it wasn't all that long ago where this time of year we could strictly focus on the bowl games. But now it seems like we're going to talk about everything else up until we actually get to the bowl games.
And this is our time to roll up our sleeves and get into this matchup. So let's start with TCU with the ball. We mentioned the explosiveness of this offense. They have Max Duggan, who, of course, everyone knows was the Heisman Trophy runner-up, a fabulous quarterback, a fierce competitor. They've got talent on the flank. They've got a really good 1,000-yard running back.
Yep.
What can Michigan fans expect against that Horned Frogs offense?
I mean, this is going to be a balanced offense in terms of the fact that they're going to try to run the football and throw the football. And you see some offenses that you can say definitively they are one more than the other, but I really do believe that TCU wants to be a team similar to the best teams in college football where balance is emphasized. So you mentioned the quarterback in Max Duggan. I think it starts with him simply because he is a guy who is a heart and soul type of player for that offense. He can throw the football, we know, but he's also a guy who's going to run it. Like, it's a got-to-have-it situation. They will put the football in his hands, probably should have at the end of the Big 12 championship game there, but he's going to leave it all out on the football field. Then it goes to the wide receiver group, and the guy that I've talked about, and I'll keep talking about him because I think he's phenomenal, is Quentin Johnston, one of their wide receivers. The dude is 6'4", 215 pounds. You can't build a body like that in a lab. And they have this unique chemistry where Max Duggan will just put it up in the air and Johnston will climb the ladder and go get it. I think that's going to be a huge matchup for Michigan, and we've seen where their corner play and their secondary play in general has been really good. But, Will Johnson is a young guy. You got DJ Turner out there. Are those players that can eliminate him out of the game plan without having to devote too many resources, because TCU is a team that is going to want to run the football. And we talked about Miller, 1,300 yards plus on the season so far. If you try to abandon the run game plan and say that you want to take away their passing attack because you think their quarterback and their wide receivers are too good, they're going to hit you with the run game. And so that's going to be the challenge for Michigan. I think they're a well-coached unit. We've talked about them all year. But they're going to be challenged by an offense that says, listen, we'll play to whatever you give us, and Michigan's going to have to find ways to kind of play this offense straight up.
Last 2 games, Michigan has given up its most yards of the year. They were the only 2 games they gave up more than 400 yards. Now, I think it's fair to point out they played Ohio State, which is one of the best offenses in the country, and a really talented Purdue offense as well. Is this more a function of the opposition, or have people found ways to exploit this Michigan defense, at least somewhat more so than they had during the course of the regular season prior to that?
No, I mean, I think with Purdue, they were playing from behind in parts of that game, specifically in the second half, so you got to throw it. And Charlie Jones was just having a game. He was out of his mind. So I think that explains a lot of it. Against Ohio State, anybody's going to give up yards to that offense, where I think Michigan did a great job against both of those teams. And where they're going to have to play extremely well is in the red zone. defensively. You can give up all of the yards that you want between the 20s, but as long as you get a guy on the ground and you make them line up, compress the football field and say, we've got enough athletes over here that it's going to be really tough to get yards down in the red zone. I think Michigan can play with anybody doing that.
And they certainly did that against Ohio State. They gave up 3 points in the second half. So, as you can say, they're kind of empty yards.
100%.
Doesn't
empty cows.
matter. They are like empty calories, yes, which we all know very well this time of year. Let's flip it to the other side. What about when Michigan has the ball against TCU? It feels like if there is one unit in the college football playoff, all 4 teams that you would say is kind of average, it's probably TCU's defense.
Yeah, and this is it's a very interesting one because I think schematically they try to make you do things kind of the hard way. And what I mean by that is they'll bring out 3 down linemen, they'll show 4 down linemen, or they'll have the outside linebackers walk up and they'll have 5 across the line of scrimmage. And a lot of times they're trying to manipulate what your blocking schemes are. So when you've got that guy in a head-up nose over the center and you've got him covering up the tackles, you're trying to create single blocks so you can get your defensive linemen, instead of those guys getting double teamed, they can just be one-on-one. It's easier to beat a man that way. Your linebackers can run through gaps. But then sometimes they'll get into more of that traditional 4-down lineman look where you can get the double teams on. It makes your offensive line think a little bit more. It makes your quarterback have to check a little bit more. And it makes your running backs really have to understand what tracks they're running depending on what you get defensively. But you're right. I think if Michigan can do what they've done all year, and that's get a rhythm going on the ground, they'll be able to move this defensive line out of the way. I think one thing that has made this Michigan offense much better down the line here is the fact that they have thrown the football with more consistency the last 2 times that we saw them. And whether it's thrown it to Colson Loveland, the young tight end, or whether it was using one of the wide receivers. I mean, we saw J.J. McCarthy hit Bell in the end zone, I believe, in the Big Ten championship game. It was a heck of a pass. I mean, that was a legitimate pass. TCU's got a Thorpe Award winner is the reason why I bring that up. That's a guy who can X somebody out of a game plan. Michigan's going to have answers for that in terms of their pass game. So basically what I'm getting at here is it might take a little while for them to really find that rhythm in the run game because they're going to see different fronts. Once they do, we know that they can move the football like that. The pass game is going to tell me what their top end is in terms of can you score 21, 28, or can you get this thing all the way out to 42 points?
The one thing we have not seen Michigan do here under Jim Harbaugh is play consistently well in the postseason. They have lost 5 straight bowl games. This is a Michigan program that's been told what it hasn't done well fairly consistently here over the last couple of years and then has turned around and done those things well. I mean, the most obvious example being how they played against Ohio State.
100%.
Is that a factor at all in a
Yes.
player's mind, like in the back of your mind, thinking for whatever reason we haven't gotten to the postseason and won?
Yes, and this team is totally different too because I feel like the players have shown us the edge that they have because we get to interact with them and we see how they answer some of our questions when we talk about these exact things. They don't care. They literally do not care. They're like, that's not this year's team. Some of those guys aren't here, and it's not to disparage those guys, but they have created their own mentality. They feel like they have the answers for what this year looks like. I'm not going to sit here and disagree with them because they've had every answer up to this point, and they've got a very unique edge. And so as much as we talk about what they haven't done, and those things are fact, it doesn't have to be a fact for this year's team, and they fully understand that.
Yeah, 1 in 5 in bowl games under Jim Harbaugh, but a chance to erase that and get themselves into the national championship game were they to knock off TCU. Our big stat brought to you by Gatorade. Ohio State into the CFP for the 5th time. They're now alone in 3rd place in terms of appearances, trailing only Alabama and Clemson, neither of which made it this year. They are the only program in the country that's been in the New Year's Six every year of its existence. They are a perfect 9 for 9. And yet for all of that success, Joshua, they are a decided underdog in this game against Georgia. Mentality-wise, how do you think that impacts them?
It used to impact the locker rooms that I was in. We never lost a game when I was at Ohio State as an underdog. And we weren't underdogs
How many did you have?
very often. It must have been, 4 or 5 games over the span of 4 years. But it goes back to saying that we always felt like we could compete in a game. So anytime we were underdogs, we felt disrespected. And these players have had to sit back now and listen to how they couldn't beat their rival for the second year in a row, and now they're underdogs, and you got to go down south, and you got to play the number one team in the country. Can't match up in the trenches. Can't match up at skill. Like, they're hearing every single thing that would either say, okay, you're going to go out here and rise up to the occasion and prove everybody wrong, or the narrative is going to continue into the offseason. And when your back is against the wall as a player, a lot of times you end up rising up to the occasion. So I'm very excited to see what Ohio State's response is going to be like. But the underdog mentality is huge. And, you know, Jerry talks about revenge, and he's a petty coach. I was a petty player. So anytime I was hearing narratives I didn't like, I felt like I had to personally go ahead and do something about it.
Are you calling DiNardo petty?
I am. I am. And I hope he's watching.
Yeah, well, that's about as accurate a description as I've ever heard. As appropriate as it gets. 2-11, by the way, all time against the SEC in bowl games, too. So, I mean, there's a lot working against Ohio State, both in terms of how they played in their last game and how they have played historically in situations like this. One thing that's working in their favor is their offense is really good. So let's start when they have the ball against a Georgia defense that showed some vulnerability in that SEC championship game. I mean, LSU threw for more than 500 yards in that game.
And Ohio State's flipping on that tape, and they're looking at exactly what LSU did, and they're saying, I think we can replicate some similar things. The one thing C.J. Stroud is going to have to do, if they can put up yards like that, is he's got to be extremely accurate, and he's got to fit the ball into some tight windows. We've seen him do that with touch. I think he's going to need to do that with a little bit of power in this game. I'm talking about a ball on a frozen rope in order to hit some of these windows that exist in the Georgia defense. But Georgia's going to play man-to-man. And what happens in man-to-man? You get beat sometimes. They're going to play some two-man so they can get some brackets over the top. But what that does is it leaves the linebackers in vulnerable matchups against some skilled tight ends, which Ohio State certainly can take advantage of as well. The one place I know Ohio State is going to struggle, because everybody has against Georgia, they've only given up 1,000 total yards rushing this season, is on the ground, because they've got some players on the interior of that defensive line. I don't know where you find them. I don't know where you find them. I would love to know where you find them, because I would like to go and find some of those guys just to take around with me so I can know I can be protected. They are phenomenal.
I think you're in good shape.
Nah. Yeah. When you see those guys,
you're a fairly large man.
They're bigger than I am.
No, that's
and
for sure.
They're athletic, and they've got great hands. They play with great fundamentals. Like, the point I'm trying to make is you have to be really good in the trenches offensively to be able to run the football inside. And knowing that you can't do that, what Georgia does a great job of is flowing over the top when plays do have to go outside. So Ohio State will need answers in the run game. You're going to try to get double teams. You're going to try to see if you can get the ball on the edges quick. But I think that they've got a plan in the pass game that could exploit some of Georgia's issues.
To your point, Georgia has given up 77 rushing yards per game. They're first in the nation. The run game was weird for Ohio State in the Michigan game. Frankly, TreVeyon Henderson is out for this game. Mine Williams obviously was banged up. The hope would be that he'd be healthy here. But it was really strange to see Chip Trainum, who had one carry all year, all of a sudden as the feature back, and Dallin Hayden, who had been playing so well, kind of in a little bit more of a lesser role there. What's your sense of what that running back rotation is going to look like?
Well, I've got no idea, but I think if Mine Williams is fully healthy, he's got to be the guy that you roll with just to start. I personally would love to see Dallin Hayden get an expanded role, because I think athletically he gives an edge similar to TreVeyon Henderson, but it's a little bit more of a linear body type. He looks like a player that's very hard to defend. I give a lot of credit to Chip Trainum and what he did against Michigan, because he ran the ball pretty effectively. Ohio State had to get out of the run game at a certain point to try to play catch-up. But this is a totally different beast, and this is not to disrespect Michigan and what they have on their defensive line, because I think Mozzie Smith is great, and it was hard to run in there. But Ohio State's going to have answers.
No, it was just strange. And again, I don't mean that against Chip Trainum either.
No.
He did a good job, but it was just weird.
It was
just
certainly
weird to have a guy
strange.
Carried the ball one time all year. And
I was shocked.
Yeah.
He's a converted linebacker playing running back.
It's a little strange.
Yeah.
Okay, what about on the other side? I mean, the issues against Michigan, pure and simple, although they didn't play great offensively in the second half. But the biggest issue was the defense. Far and away. Getting gashed, giving up big plays. So really good Georgia offense. The tight ends are virtually impossible to match up with. I don't know if they have the same level of wide receiver as Ohio State does. I mean, maybe that's the one area where you'd say not as much, but they have a veteran quarterback. They've got a host of different running backs. They're really good. and we know the Buckeyes have to be questioning themselves a little.
There are some questions, and as you flip on the tape, there will be even more questions. You talked about the tight end group, and I think that's where it starts for this Georgia offense. Darnell Washington, 6'7", 280 pounds, sounds like a guy who could be an offensive tackle, but he's playing tight end. He can run like a gazelle. He can catch like a wide receiver. Like, again, where do you find these guys? I would like to know. But he is going to be the key, even more so than Brock Bowers to me, for this offense, because he's going to tell you a lot. And the last time we had talked about this matchup specifically, I said the personnel was going to give away a lot of what the offense was going to be. The way that Washington lines up, whether he's moving or not, pre-snap, all those different things are going to give hints to this Ohio State defense for what they can expect. So they've got to key in on him to make sure they can get that done. I agree with you. I think that Georgia has good wide receivers. I'm not exactly sure it's a great group. So Ohio State can probably get into a little bit of that man-to-man that they've been playing, understanding that they can match up on the edges, but do you really want to play man-to-man on those tight ends? Because that's where Bowers really comes into the game plan. So there are going to be challenges here. The one thing that I want to see, regardless of whether they want to play more zone, more man, whether they want to get aggressive and blitz, structure to the defense. What I mean by that is I want to see levels. We think of defenses as a defensive line. You have a second level with the linebackers, the third level with your secondary. And sometimes you watch this Ohio State defense, and it's one level with some secondary players, some defensive line, some linebackers. You got a second level that's probably 6 yards back behind it, and there's nobody deep. And when you miss a tackle, when you misfit a run play, there's nobody there as a safety net to make a tackle, get a guy on the ground so you can play another down.
Do you believe they'll stick with that? I mean, I was surprised they didn't make changes at halftime of the Michigan game. Like, that's what lost them the game. Do you think that given 6 weeks now to make an adjustment, they will come out with that same look?
I think you make adjustments. I think you have maybe more answers. Maybe you get away from it if it doesn't work early on a little bit faster, but this is the same defense that got them up to a top 10 ranking before they played Michigan.
I understand, but we used to say the same thing about Don Brown. I'm not saying it's the same. I'm not saying it's the same deal.
Totally get it.
But I'm just saying Don Brown's defense was great until the other team had talent as good as theirs, and then the whole thing fell apart.
Totally get it. And that's the question that they have to ask is how much are you willing to play on the fringes like that? Because this is an aggressive defense. I talked about it when they hired Jim Knowles, but this is a defense where you're going to give up big plays because you got guys in man-to-man, you're running blitzes all the time. Like, it's boom or bust. It's high risk, high reward, and that's exactly what we saw. To answer your question, yes, I think they're going to do that because that has 100% been their identity. And you can say that even when they weren't in those heavy blitz looks, they gave up some of the plays that really killed them. I think it was the second deep pass that they had against Michigan that they gave up. That was in a cover 2 look. Yeah, so you had a cornerback who didn't get a jam, so you get a free release. You have a safety on the backside who's jumping down with the dig coming out of the boundary. So he's not getting the depth that you need him to. Of course, the field side safety gets turned around, and everybody thinks it's his fault, but really his buddy wasn't there to kind of be that backstop just in case it did split the middle of the field. So you give them up when you're blitzing. You give them up when you're trying to play a little bit of relief too. So it's more about execution than it is about scheme to a certain point. This is not to point fingers at players, not to point fingers at coaches. Everybody's got to be on the same page, but you can point to a lot of reasons for why that didn't work out. And I think that they're going to come out with a similar game plan that we've seen all year.
Joshua, great stuff. Look forward to previewing these games more with you here in the couple weeks
it'll
to
be
come.
fun.
And hopefully nationwide a Michigan-Ohio State national championship.
I would love to do that.
LA, that would really be something, wouldn't it? This comes at us from the not even remotely surprising but true department. Peter Skoronski, the outstanding offensive lineman for Northwestern, has declared for the NFL draft. Skoronski, a unanimous All-American this past season. As you can see, Pro Football Focus has him as their top-ranked offensive lineman. Andy Katz ranked his top 10 players in the Big Ten to start the year, had Trace Jackson Davis at number 1, followed by Hunter Dickinson, Zach Edey, and Chris Murray. Jamison Battle, of course, been banged up some this year. He was number 5. 2 Hoosiers, 2 Scarlet Knights in the top 10. Andy, of course, is here. You saw him earlier in the show, and we're going to give him the opportunity 1 month in to re-rank. I've got to say, the list was pretty good.
Better than last year.
It was better. You brought it up. I did.
I know. I'm just Leave it at that.
It was better than
last
last year. Let's start here from number 10. Where are you starting?
Well, so I went back and forth here on number 10 because last week I had Jameer Young in that spot when he hit essentially the game winner, the clincher, if you will, against Illinois. He has struggled since, and so has Maryland. So I went with Zed Key, who has been the most consistent Buckeye over the first month of the season. We didn't know at the beginning of the season if Justice Sewing would be healthy. He has been. The Buckeyes told me they thought Tanner Holden could be their best player, but it's been Zed Key, the veteran. So I said he has to be on this list.
4 double-doubles already
Yes.
this year. He had 2 in his career coming in. He's shown the range. He's expanded out to three-point range a little bit this year, so having a really nice year. So he's number 10. Who's number 9?
Well, so if we can show the list here again, at number 9, help me out here because you didn't get the list.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to feed me here. I'm just going to make sure I memorize all these. Cliff Amore.
Yes, Cliff
Thank
Amore.
you.
Okay.
Cliff Amore has been, there have been a couple games where he has been in foul trouble, but still, he is one of the most entertaining, I think most difficult big men to match. And with a Rutgers team that played well early, yes, controversial loss to Ohio State, did beat Indiana where he did not play a lot because he got in foul trouble. But overall, when he's on the floor, he has been incredibly effective.
Dunking machine.
Yes.
From great distances, top 4 in the Big Ten in rebounding and blocks. Okay, so you cannot say I'm not adaptable. I'm
Yes.
going to change here in midstream, and I will tell you who's number 8, Joey Hauser.
Yes. So Joey Hauser is my 8th player here. And again, with Michigan State, you could go in a variety of directions here. A.J. Hoggard struggled early. Last couple games has played very well. Malik Hall, one of their better players, has been injured. But Joey Hauser, a player that certainly has to be playing well for Michigan State to get to the highest level that they can, has answered the call for Michigan State. Tom Izzo has said throughout the course of the season how impressed he has been with Hauser responding to more of a leadership and scoring role. So I think it's significant that Hauser has been arguably their most consistent scorer.
Pleasant surprise,
Yes.
for sure. Number 7 from Champaign.
Yeah, look, Terrence Shannon has had moments. Again, Coleman Hawkins, I was at his game where he had a triple-double against Syracuse. But Terrence Shannon, originally I think we all thought he might be the best player outside of Chase Jackson Davis in the Big Ten, coming over from Texas Tech. But he has not been as consistent. I know I was at that Maryland game where he got the stitches, and that hurt him in that game. He came back later in that game and contributed before they ended up losing. Texas game in overtime, did not play well early, played well late. But again, he has to be on this list because if Illinois is going to reach its potential, he has to be one of their best players, if not their best player.
Well, I was at the game against Penn State and got called out just a little bit afterward by
Yes.
Brad Underwood. So this will be the first game tomorrow. Since then, we'll see how he responds. Number 6 is an interesting one. He went to Madison.
Yeah, again, you could have gone a number of different directions with the Badgers, but Tyler Wall, matchup problem for them. At the beginning of the season, did we think it was going to be Chucky Hepburn? Was it going to be Stephen Kroll? Obviously, Asijan's had a great year as a freshman so far, but I still think that as Wisconsin goes, Tyler Wall has to perform. And in some big games this year, he has answered. Wisconsin, did not play well against Lehigh last night. They still get the W, but Wall has to be that difference maker for the Badgers.
Where are you going with number 5?
So at number 5, say again?
Number 5.
Okay. Jalen Pickett was on my top 10. So I was pleased that I got him there with Penn State in the top 10 in the preseason. And Jalen Pickett, who is a point forward, he's a point guard, but he's a big point guard. And he's not your traditional point guard, but he's been a stat stuffer for the Nittany Lions. And, Pickett certainly is the main reason that they won a game that you did against Illinois.
Yep.
They lost that home game to Michigan State, but I think Jalen Pickett will be the reason if Penn State plays in the postseason.
Top 5 in the nation in assists and still leads his team in scoring and rebounding. That is pretty good. Number 4, a guy who's been banged up in Iowa City.
Yeah, Chris Murray. Early on, had played like his brother Keegan and was producing at a high rate, but he's been hurt with a lower leg injury, lower body injury is how they're sort of terming it. But when he is on the floor, he is highly productive, stat stuffer, and can be the difference for Iowa being a contender.
Number 3, a guy who you had in your top 3 at the beginning of the year, Hunter Dickinson.
Yeah, look, I mean, Hunter has been a consistent anchor for the Wolverines. They have struggled at times with a difficult schedule, but you cannot say anything really overly negative about Hunter Dickinson. Just the team has struggled a little bit, but he has done what he's supposed to do as a leader, as a scorer, as a rim protector, playing at both ends of the court.
And number 2 was your preseason
Yeah,
number
look,
1.
TJD, had the triple-double earlier, a week ago. Preseason All-American, preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. The Arizona game exposed him a little bit. Bigger, longer, bigs, and a number of them really caused him problems. He did play much better the week before against Armando Bacot of North Carolina. But TJD, right now, he is the second best player in the Big Ten when he's on. I don't see him taking that first spot.
No, I don't either, but he has really been fabulous. Top 6 in the Big Ten in scoring, rebounding, field goal percentage, blocks. He's just been fabulous. But Zach Edey's the best player in the country right now.
He is in the pole position, even though I don't really like auto racing. I'll use the term. He's in the pole position for National Player of the Year. He's been a double-double machine. As you correctly pointed out a couple times, he out-rebounded, or he was almost out-rebounding 2 opponents in a row. I think Hofstra got him by 1.
Did out-rebound Minnesota.
Yes. That was the 31-22 game.
Yeah.
Hofstra combined with the Minnesota, I think it was 41-40, if I'm not mistaken, on the boards.
Yes.
So every game, you're going to get at least close to a double-double. You're going to get double figure scoring. The Nebraska game that went to overtime for Purdue, he didn't score as well, but he blocked shots. He rebounded, I think it's 17 boards in that game.
He played 43 minutes.
Which was unheard of last year
Yes.
because of him sharing his time with Travion Williams. So the fact that he's been able to stay on the floor, he's continued his skill development. People just cannot match up with him. We saw this in the non-conference games against Gonzaga, the trio of bigs from Duke. They just got winded, and he is going to be a problem for everyone in this league.
He is in unbelievable shape.
Yes.
I mean, to be able to run up and down the floor for 43 minutes at 7'4" and still be as effective as he's been. He's played over 30 minutes, 8 of their 10 games. It's remarkable what great condition he is in. So here is Andy's list in an easy-to-comprehend format. 7 of the 10 players are the same as the original list. That's pretty good. Wall, Hauser, and Key, the 3 who weren't there. And is this going to be updated every month? What's the plan?
Well, if you'll have me back, we certainly can. I don't think the top 2 will change much, but I think we're going to see different players potentially from Wisconsin, maybe Ohio State, maybe Michigan State, maybe Rutgers. And the fact that there's no one on this list from Maryland, that could change because Dante Scott certainly could come back. But, Maryland right now is really struggling. We'll see if they can turn things around.